Who are some badasses in history that school didn't teach you about? Michael Malloy. He was an Irish alcoholic who frequented a bar. 3 friends including the bar's owner decided to take out 2 life insurance policies on him. First, they let him drink as much alcohol as he wanted without him having to pay. After that failed, they gave him methanol. That plan also failed. Then they gave him a sardine sandwich soaked in methanol and filled with nails, if I remember right. Michael asks for another sandwich after eating the first one. Then they decided to dump him in the freezing cold and pour water on top of him. After that plan failed, they just ran him over with their taxi. He came back a few days later, and the men decided to wait until Michael fell unconscious. After that, they took him upstairs, put a gas pipe in his mouth, and wrapped a towel around his head. This was the last attempt on his life, and was successful. They were then arrested for attempted fraud and murder. Ernst Junger, professional soldier in WWI. Had a blast, loved it, and wrote a book about how much fun he had called Storm of Steel. Lamented conscriptioners picking off lads who didn't want to be there was too easy and just seemed unsporting. Outspoken about German politics, remained in the military, not a fan of Hitler, but when his henchmen said to kill him, Hitler famously said let Junger be, because he was such an actual, genuine badass and legend. He got posted looking after occupied Paris and keeping folk in check, therefore WWI so spent his time dining fine, eating lobster and drinking wine with the likes of Satter, Dali, Picasso. Wrote an incredible sci-fi book, The Glass Bees, very prophetic and a great read. Remained a writer and lived to like 100, still carrying WWI shrapnel in him forever, haha. Considered himself apolitical and the term an anarch. Petra Kelly, an ecofeminist activist, she founded the first iteration of the Green Party in Germany in 1979. She participated in many marches against nuclear, was arrested for demanding the freedom of prisoners of the East German peace movement. Her vision for the world united ecological concerns with disarmament, human rights, and social justice. She wrote a treatise describing these views called Fighting for Hope. She moved away from the Greens when they started collaborating with other parties, as she opposed alliance with any existing party. She died tragically young, 44, in a murder-suicide by the hand of her partner and ex-general who had turned to the Green Party when disillusioned. Nobody knows why he would have killed her and then himself, and their bodies were discovered too late to do a thorough investigation. While this may catch some flack for being on the wrong side of the war, but Germany had a couple badass tank commanders. Regardless of what side they were fighting, the accomplishment remains impressive from an objective military standpoint. German tank ace Michael Wittmann. He was the commander of a Tiger I tank in WW2. He destroyed 156 enemy tanks, 200 artillery/anti-tank guns, 300 smaller military vehicles. During the Battle of Villers-Bocage he destroyed 29 Allied vehicles, of which 14 tanks in the span of 15 minutes. Another is Otto Carius, which is credited with 150 tank kills, and even 1 plane shot down. Kurt Nispel was another commander credited with 168 tank kills, and is regarded as one of the most successful tank commanders in history. Lieutenant General Sir Adrian Carton Deward VCKBECBCMGDSO. I quote directly from his Wikipedia page. He was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration awarded for valor in the face of the enemy in various Commonwealth countries. He served in the Boer War, First World War and Second World War. He was shot in the face, head, stomach, ankle, leg, hip, and ear, survived 2 plane crashes, tunneled out of a prisoner of war camp, and tore off his own fingers when a doctor refused to amputate them. Describing his experiences in the First World War, he wrote, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war. My grandfather was on one of the first convoys of troops to Europe after Pearl Harbor. The boat he was on was sunk by a sub. They did not have enough boats for everyone, so they handed out knives that were designed to easily pierce shark skin, which he found out later was totally BS. With his knife strapped on, he swam a little under a half mile to another ship. That's the only story I ever heard about the war. Left Adnan Sadie. In 1942, Adnan led a 42-strong platoon from the Malay Regiment against the Japanese Imperial Army. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Adnan refused to surrender and urged his men to fight to the end. They held off the Japanese for 2 days amid heavy enemy shelling from artillery and tanks, as well as chronic shortages of food, medical supplies and ammunition. On the last day of the battle, Adnan and his men were left with only a few grenades and had to fight the Japanese with their bayonets in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Adnan was shot, but he continued fighting. He was finally captured, hung upside down on a tree, and bayoneted to death. He was highly respected by the Japanese, who valued his bravery, unlike most of the British soldiers who retreated and surrendered despite having better weapons and are well rested. The Japanese army, who have been covering huge distances, were low on supply, weapons, and ammunition. Matthias Rust. He is a German man who in 1987, during the Cold War, flew his Cessna airplane from West Germany to Moscow. He just got his pilot license. Because the Red Square was full of people at the time of his arrival, he landed on the Moskva Bridge and stopped near the Basilius Cathedral. He stepped out of his plane in a good mood and chatted with bypassers. The militia let him be because they were amused. It took 2 hours for the Russian intelligence to show up and arrest him. This happened on a Russian holiday. Rust was 18 years old at the time, few days before his 19th birthday. His stunt led to a crisis in the Soviet government. Timur the Lame, otherwise known as Tamerlane, born in a tribe in Uzbekistan. Timur and a small band of followers raided travelers for goods, especially animals such as sheep, horses, and cattle. Timur tried to steal a sheep from a shepherd, but was shot by 2 arrows, one in his right leg and another in his right hand, where he lost 2 fingers. Both injuries crippled him for life. Hence the name Timur the Lame. Despite this, he joined the military and became head of 1,000 horses. Timur was sent to negotiate with an invader, but joined with him instead, and was rewarded with the rule of Transoxania. Timur spent the next 35 years in various wars and expeditions. He not only consolidated his rule at home by the subjugation of his foes, but extended territory by encroachments upon the lands of foreign powers. His conquests to the west and northwest led him to the lands near the Caspian Sea, and to the banks of the Ural and the Volga. Conquests in the south and southwest encompassed almost every province in Persia, including Baghdad, Kabul and northern Iraq. Even as far south as India suffered the wrath of Tamerlane after Delhi fell to Timur's army. Eventually he died through illness on a winter expedition to defeat the mighty Emperor Ming in the east.